early voting numbers have been historic. But this presidential election could drag on well beyond Election Day as lawyers line up across the nation to challenge voting rules and individual votes. Michael McDonald, a University of Florida professor who specializes in American elections, says it appears that about 100 million early votes will be cast by Tuesday. Florida could be ground zero for litigation. The race between President Donald Trump and Democratic challenger Joe Biden is expected to be a close one, with a fat 29 electoral votes at stake. Only California and Texas provide a bigger elections prize. Some context. Democrats and Republicans in Florida have engaged legions of lawyers ready to rush to court at any sign of voter suppression or fraud. In 2000, the Florida vote was ultimately settled in George Bush's favor by a margin of 537 votes when the U.S. Supreme Court, in Bush v. Gore, stopped a recount ordered by the Florida Supreme Court. The premier legal issue this year is the use and counting of mail-in ballots, which President Donald Trump has criticized without evidence as a potential source of fraud. Pennsylvania, another swing state, has drawn Trump's ire because it could take days for all the mail-in ballots were counted. As soon as that election's over, we're going in with our lawyers, Trump said. As Election Day approaches, USA Today is keeping track of what's happening as voters around the country cast ballots. Here are some important headlines. A peaceful protest to get out the vote in Graham, North Carolina, has fueled controversy after local police twice pepper-sprayed marchers. About 100 Trump train drivers clashed with several protesters in Louisville on Sunday before caravanning to the Kentucky Exposition Center for a rally in support of President Donald Trump. From pandemic fears to complex ID requirements to lack of nearby polling places, young voters are facing an unprecedented array of obstacles. But despite suppression tactics, young voters are raising hell with historic early voting turnout. Will your ballot be safe? An in-depth look. Millions of voters going to the polls Tuesday will cast their ballots on machines blasted as unreliable and inaccurate for 2 decades by computer scientists from Princeton University to Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. On Election Day, here's our promise to you. We'll be monitoring polling places nationwide, correcting misinformation and providing accurate results. More from USA Today's editor-in-chief Nicole Carroll. Historic early voting numbers compiled by the U.S. Elections Project website show at least 94 million people have already voted. Illegal voting in battleground Wisconsin. It's not a thing. Amid the nationwide paranoia over voting fraud, a study of illegal voting in Wisconsin determined that it pretty much just doesn't happen. The Wisconsin Elections Commission identified 158 suspected cases referred to 46 county prosecutors from 2016 to 2018. Even if all of them were actually illegal votes, the number is a minute fraction of ballots cast. The highest number of referrals came in the 2018 general election after the Elections Commission expanded its capability to detect fraud. The 58 suspected cases out of 2.7 million votes cast represents 0.002% of all votes, or about 1 in every 46,000. Most of the issues, it turned out, were from errors and not fraud. In case after case and time after time, allegations of material numbers of people intentionally committing vote fraud. They just don't withstand any scrutiny, said Kenneth Mayer, professor of American politics at the University of Wisconsin. Eric Lipke, Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. Trump caravans roll across nation. Trump's supporters have been rolling in caravans through cities and towns across America in recent days, waving flags, honking horns and posting videos on social media with the hashtag MAGA drag the interstate hashtag. Some became controversial. In California, multiple caravans were reported, including one that paraded for 60 miles through Riverside County on Sunday. The Los Angeles Times reports The sheriff's department said officers made no arrests but did field a few complaints from intimidated voters. In Texas, a caravan of vehicles displaying Trump campaign flags and signs swarmed a Biden campaign bus Friday, leading the Democrats on board to call 911 and cancel an Austin stop. Trump defended his backers, but the FBI is investigating. In Kentucky, about 100 Trump train drivers clashed with protesters in Louisville. The protesters, upset the group was allowed to use school property, attempted to block vehicles from leaving the parking lot. Some members of both groups were armed, but no violence was reported. In Virginia, Richmond police say a mobile political rally dubbed a Trump train entered the city Sunday, leading to incidents at the Robert E. Lee Monument. One woman reported being sprayed by someone in a vehicle, and police were investigating a possible gunshot. In New Jersey, social media videos show Trump flags flying from vehicles that backed up traffic for 5 miles on the Garden State Parkway. "We shut it down, baby. We shut it down," a man is heard saying in one clip. GOP asks federal judge to throw out 127,000 votes in Houston. A federal judge in Texas was weighing whether Houston area officials should discard almost 127,000 votes cast at drive-through voting sites. Republicans accuse Harris County Clerk Chris Hollins, a Democrat, of exceeding his authority by allowing drive-through voting during the coronavirus pandemic. They say the system is an illegal expansion of curbside voting, which is only available to people with disabilities. The Texas Secretary of State, Republican Ruth Hughes, approved the practice earlier this year. The Texas Supreme Court on Sunday rejected the GOP effort. In Oregon, few concerns about a quick vote count, while national elections analysts are cautioning voters that there may not be definitive winners on election night because of the preponderance of mail ballots. The picture will likely be much clearer in Oregon, which votes only by mail. The state's experience with vote-by-mail elections allows officials to routinely announce a significant number of ballots immediately after polls close, late afternoon or early evening on Election Day. Vote tallies are taken via flash drive to a secure computer with different software and uploaded to the county's and Secretary of State's results web pages. A paper ballot is verifiable. Gov. Kate Brown said in a statement urging Oregonians to vote. "It's safe. You don't have to put your health or your life at risk to participate." Bill Poehler, Salem Statesman Journal. Voting rights marchers in NC vow to return on Election Day. The leader of a march to get out the vote in Graham, North Carolina, that turned chaotic after local police used pepper spray and made several arrests vowed to lead another protest on Election Day. Our organization, marchers, demonstrators and potential voters left here sunken, sad, traumatized, obstructed and distracted from our intention to lead people all the way to the polls, said the Rev. Gregory Drumright, who organized Saturday's march. In a news conference Sunday, "I want you to know, November 3 is coming. We're going to march on November 3. As a crowd of about 200 people arrived on foot at the county courthouse to speak near a polling location about voting rights. Officers with the Graham Police Department fired pepper spray while telling the civil rights group to get out of the street. Police said in a statement that pepper spray was fired onto the ground, not at protesters. Some protesters said children and a woman on an electric scooter were among those hit by the pepper spray. A reporter with the Burlington Times-News, part of the USA Today network, who was at the scene and was also pepper sprayed, did not hear any advance warning before the police action. Dean Paul Stevens, Rachel Berry and Isaac Groves. Times-News. Power will be on at voting sites across battered New Orleans. New Orleans polling stations darken for almost a week after Hurricane Zeta will have power on Election Day, authorities said. easing a controversy between New Orleans Democratic mayor and Louisiana's Republican Secretary of State. Mayor LaToya Cantrell said Sunday that up to 11 city precincts could still be without power Tuesday, nearly a week after the storm toppled power lines. She said Secretary of State Kyle Ardoin and his Commissioner of Elections, Sherry Wharton-Hadsky, were refusing to provide support for generators. Ardoin quickly lashed back, but the city later issued a statement saying that Energy New Orleans was estimating that only 3 polling stations could be without power Tuesday. Portable generators and lighting will be provided by the company, the state's Homeland Security Office and the Secretary of State's office. Florida bracing for litigation over mailed-in ballots. More than 4.2 million votes had been cast by mail statewide, according to the Florida Secretary of State's office. Despite Trump's chagrin at mail-in voting, both parties have promoted it in Florida during the coronavirus pandemic. Last week, however, advocates said thousands of mail-in ballots had been flagged in Florida because of signature problems. Juanica Fernandez, executive director of the nonprofit State Voices Florida, said too many of Florida mail-in ballots have been rejected because of issues such as new addresses and mismatched signatures. This leaves a voter without an opportunity to have their voice heard. And that's not acceptable, Fernandez said. They are not counting the ballots at all. Expert projects 160 million will vote. 67% turnout. Michael McDonald, University of Florida professor behind the U.S. Elections Project, for months has been estimating that 150 million people will vote, has upped the ante in recent days. Now that more early vote data are available, I'm ready to make a more concrete prediction, McDonald said. Examining each state in turn, and rolling up the state estimates to a national estimate, I arrive at a total turnout rate of 160.2 million votes, or a turnout rate for those eligible to vote of 67.0%. In 2016, fewer than 140 million Americans voted, a turnout rate of about 56%. The total votes were the most ever cast in a U.S. presidential election. Lost ballots in Pennsylvania possibly in the thousands. Officials in Butler County, Pennsylvania, perhaps the most critical of battleground states in the election, are scrambling to get mail ballots to potentially thousands of voters who requested them and did not receive them. County call centers and email addresses set up to handle elections issues were flooded last week with messages, leading officials to conclude a large number of ballots had been lost and prompting them to make last-ditch efforts to deliver them. Our main focus, because it's too late now to worry about this, we need to make sure we get these people their ballots, Butler County Commissioner Leslie Osh said. Nearly 40,000 registered voters in Butler County requested mail ballots, but only 24% of them have been returned to the county, by far the lowest rate among the state's 67 counties. The U.S. Postal Service has been asked to immediately investigate. USPS said the agency was unaware of any significant delays or issues. Jamie Martins, Spotlight PA, election problems. What to keep in mind. This cheat sheet from Columbia Journalism Review offers tips for media organizations reporting on election 2020 that are a good reminder of what to expect on election day. Voting problems aren't failures. They happen every year and, as CJR notes, hiccups such as voting machines not working or polling places opening late don't mean anything is rigged. Happen every year and, as CJR notes, hiccups such as voting machines not working or polling places opening late don't mean anything is rigged. Some problems, however, are significant. CJR recommends the media scrutinize areas that have a history of voter suppression or obstructing minority voters, calling out Georgia as a place to monitor. CJR recommends the media scrutinize areas that have a history of voter suppression or obstructing minority voters, calling out Georgia as a place to monitor. Don't expect a winner on election night. This year is different because mail-in ballots could be as high as 30%. Previously, that number was 3% to 5%. It will take a while to tally. This year is different because mail-in ballots could be as high as 30%. Previously, that number was 3% to 5%. It will take a while to tally. Seriously, expect to wait. State vote certification deadlines differ and don't have to be reported to the federal level until Dec. 8. Additionally, the Electoral College doesn't meet until Dec. 14. Headlines from elsewhere and resources on voting. From ProPublica, their election land project goes deep on issues that can affect eligible voters' ability to cast a ballot. Their election land project goes deep on issues that can affect eligible voters' ability to cast a ballot. From Pew, Stateline, the Barriers to the Ballot Box project takes on how changes to polling places impact communities. The Barriers to the Ballot Box project takes on how changes to polling places impact communities. Ballotopedia, resources and guides to not just the election, but also voting. Resources and guides to not just the election, but also voting. From the Associated Press, more voting headlines that should be on your radar. Checkbox with check how to make sure your mail-in ballot is counted and not discarded. Ballot box with Ballot USA. Today's voter guide has everything you need on registering to vote, when your state begins voting, and what the candidates think about the issues. Email for updates to your inbox. Subscribe to our Daily on Politics newsletter. Worried about voter suppression? Lawyers Have Election Laws Hotline. Nearly 24,000 lawyers are volunteering to help voters across the country navigate changes in what has become an unprecedented election cycle. Organizers of Election Protection, a national coalition of civil rights and voting rights groups, said the number of volunteers has quadrupled since the 2016 presidential election and the 2018 midterm elections. They're bracing for even more calls as Election Day nears and in the days and weeks following. The Election Protection Hotline, 866-RVOTE, is available all year, but calls have ramped up in recent weeks as millions started casting ballots early in some states. The hotline has received more than 100,000 calls since July, averaging about 7,000 a day. Organizers said, at this point in 2016, the group had fielded 21,000 calls since January of that year. Deborah Barfield Berry, contributing, The Associated Press.